Welcome to our April 24th, 2024 Corridor Conversations.
Thank you. This item is about the bridge that lifts between Benicia and Martinez. It is the second largest source of hour delay for Capital Corridor trains. So each lift is roughly an average of 20 minutes delay, and then our trains are forced out of their slot in terms of where they meet other trains. So resolving the Benicia-Martinez lift bridge situation is a very important one if we're going to ever expand service in the future with more frequency. The more times the bridge lifts for marine traffic is the more times we have catastrophic delays for Capital Corridor. So what we launched into on this project was a study to look at different options for a high-level bridge that doesn't need to lift for marine traffic. We evaluated several options that cross the bay. Let me stop this. I gotta go back. I have to do full screen. There we go. Okay. Thanks, Leo. The topic I'm going to talk about is the Carquinez bridge lift. It's a situation that we have today. As many of you who have ridden the train, you might have been delayed by the bridge lifting for marine traffic. This is the second largest source of our delay for Capital Corridor trains. And if you're delayed, it's usually about a 20-minute delay. And then the rest of the time, the train is trying to carry on its way. It's out of slot. It meets trains in the wrong spot. And that can cascade into further and further delays. In addition, if we're ever to add more service and we still had the bridge lift, it would be very catastrophic for the entire service because a marine vessel could be coming through and delay us even more and have more and more cascading delays. So we went underway with a study to develop options to look at alleviating that with a high-level bridge that doesn't need to lift. So we looked at various options that would cross the Carquinez Straits at some point in some manner. We looked at tunnels even going under. We looked at bridges going over at various different locations, different concepts. And we eliminated many of those, and we got those down to about 4 remaining options to consider for future study. All these other options were too long, too costly, too impactful, such as going across the city of Benicia with a large bridge over residences. So that didn't seem very feasible. So we left with the 4 options that you see on the screen here. 2 around Vallejo that basically follows the rail corridors and tries to connect with the rail corridor that exists in Vallejo. And then one that kind of runs along the I-80 route in the green on this image. Then we had 2 other options. We had the Benicia-Martinez option on the west side of the existing bridges there, the highway bridges, and then we had 1 option on the east side. Those are common along the shoreline, and then they divert by one going to the west, one going to the east. So we had all these options at the same level of operations, 2 trains per hour, or more in each direction per the state rail plan. So they're all equally comparable. And then we shifted into looking at the bridges themselves.
Okay, there's 2 marine channels also on the west side of the Benicia-Martinez options, and then there's only 1, which is the one that we crossed today on the east side. So if we can go to the next slide. So this is just the kind of the mathematical conclusion of what I was kind of hinting at here. The Vallejo bridges are really difficult and expensive. So they seem to be quite costly as compared to the different Martinez bridge options in terms of the weight and the dead load and the things that bridges have to be designed to do, including carrying freight trains and definitely passenger trains. So that's a hint of which options aren't as favorable. So if we can go to the next slide. Okay, so that was not the only deciding factor around kind of favoring more heavily a Benicio Martinez option. The other situation in Vallejo was that once you get to Vallejo, the way you'd have to get there, you'd have to tunnel underneath homes. There'd be noise and vibration in the homes. And then finally, there is a right-of-way in Vallejo, but it wasn't designed to carry that level of traffic. And there would be potentially maybe up to 10 grade separations. And that would be very disruptive within the town to accommodate at different intersections. So it does not look good for the Vallejo options. On the Benicio Martinez side, in the slide that you're seeing here, you can see the yellow dots indicate problem areas for a west span option. I already mentioned the two kind of red lines, which are the navigation channels. There's two that have to be bridged over here. The other dot that's to the north on the Benicia side is representing a concern about weaving a rail bridge approach through the highway bridges and all the kind of spaghetti that's there in terms of infrastructure. The next part on the south side, on the Martinez side, is where the structure really has to start. So because this is just that little bit more to the west, what it does is it pushes the approach angle of the track further into Martinez and is more disruptive in terms of requiring modifications to the refinery that's there and also to the town area. So the west side is not looking as good as the east side. So if we can go to the next slide. This is the east side option, which appears to be the most promising. There's only one sort of dot to be concerned about here, at least initially. There will be certainly other things that will pop up, but the wetland area, it's just off the map, these aerial maps, that there's a bit of a wetland area right in that little corner as the maps touch together. The other thing that was interesting about this east side option is that because the freight trains and the passenger trains really need to use this right away and do today, as you know, the way this bridge could be built with a truss structure could be that the passenger rail, the bridge option, could go on top of the freight rail option because the passenger option can climb at a steeper angle than the freight train. So it does provide some pretty good value for the structure of the bridge, that it can do two jobs and not be as wide or as costly as potentially is another design option. But there are several options that do work. There's a kind of a flat concrete structure option that seems to be also promising. So that is the conclusion. We'll go to the last slide on this topic, just to summarize how we kind of got there. These are just some rating scales. The scale of 1 is a low rating, which is you want a low score, or a 10 is high. So we roughly looked at the two columns, the Vallejo and the I-80 are basically the Vallejo options. The bridge is much, much more technically complicated. The approaches are quite complicated because the hills at that location, and then the community impacts, which I talked about with the grade separations, the tunnels, and those kind of things. And on top of that, the ability to accommodate freight trains, so they also get out of the way and they stay in this flow that we have with the passenger trains, was also not as good. The west route, as I talked about, looks much better from a bridge standpoint, but then it has troubles on the approaches. It has a bit more community impact, and it has slightly more freight barriers, but not so much. So the clear winner from our study at this point in time is the Benicio Martinez East route. And even though the approaches are complex, it's the least complex option of all. So that concludes a very abbreviated study of the Benicia Martinez options that we're looking at. Our next steps on this are to consider the context of this in the overall operating scheme, and that's a partnership between Caltrans and the Federal Railroad Administration, using this information to inform how we would order getting into the actual project development that's suggested here. So with that, I think that concludes the question, or concludes my talk about this subject, and I can try to answer any questions should we have this.
Great. Thank you, Jim. I think we're just going to move right through this, and any additional questions you may have, you can please throw them in the chat, or you can hold them until the end of the session. We'll get to them at that time as well. So we're going to move into this next segment, which are the responses and feedback we received from our annual business public workshops and business plan workshops. And with that, we have Leo Sanchez, who is our Deputy Managing Director, who will talk a little bit about what our findings were and what you all had to say about your feedback to the business plan. Leo?
Thanks, Renee. So in this annual business plan workshop that we held, we were really excited to get back out and ride with the public. We were able to get on a few different trains between Rob, our managing director, and other staff, along with myself. We had multiple face-to-face interactions and engagement that really gave us a lot of good feedback. We kept the same forums that we've done previously with Zoom, like this workshop. And we were also able to get attendees that couldn't make it on the train to join via Zoom, as well as getting a variety of comments and questions electronically. So it was a huge success. I think we've had the most number of questions and comments, at least since I've been here at Capital Quarter. So it was well over 100. And we really tried to do a good job of picking those that were coming up most frequently in terms of themes and topics that you all wanted us to hear about and maybe even answer in this forum. And they're really highlighted here on this slide. So it ranges everything from service enhancements, talking about our Tap to Ride contactless EMV program, schedule related topics that came up, including a lot of great suggestions from riders, some general inquiries about stations related to ADA improvements and other improvements that are happening, a lot of questions about equipment needs, and those are the same ones that we have top of mind here at Capital Quarter. And then a lot of great comments advocating for the Cafe car and the amenities that we provide with our onboard services. So let's go ahead and dive right into these. And I think I can take several of these, and then I'll reach out to a few staff here that might be able to provide additional input. So we'll start first with service enhancement requests. And the general theme that came up was about wanting to know about our schedule and when we're going back to full service. So I'll start with that one, and then I'll pick on a few of these different topics that came up, and we'll do the best we can to answer all of your questions and comments that are coming through. So in terms of our schedule change, and that's really a two-part thing. First, it's actually being able to restore our full service. And in terms of that, our goal is to do that later this year in the, we call it federal fiscal year 25, but it basically starts October 1st of 2024, and that goes through September of next year, 2025. Our goal is to do it as quickly as we have our equipment and financial resources in place to really be able to do that. I'm going to touch on one of the comments that came through that was asking about the venture cars. The venture cars really are important for us to really be able to have the ability to do that. And the venture cars are actually planned to be utilized on the San Joaquin route. So they're not going to be utilized on the Capital Corridor route, but they will give us the ability to free up equipment that will no longer be needed on the San Joaquin route. And that will give us added equipment that we can be able to utilize on our service, as well as our partners in Southern California at Losan. So that's the first element of service. In terms of actually making improvements to the schedule, we are currently underway with working with one of our consultants to really get that project kickstarted. And I would say that we're going to start looking at elements of the schedule where improvements are needed. I'm going to highlight just a few brief things that came up on the comments. Some of them were about midday service, some of them talking about connectivity down into San Jose. Both of those are things that are really important to us. So I'm really glad that they actually came through on the comments, because they show us that those are the things that are important, that we perceive as important, but it's really confirmed by hearing it from the riders in terms of requests that they would like to see addressed. Another thing that I'll say about maybe adjustments to the schedule is that we want to try to do some things sooner than later. So we don't want to just wait for the venture cars to be here in their entirety before we do anything. We do want to see how things progress, and as we have some equipment available, we want to first add a little elbow room, because we realize that the cars are starting to get pretty full in some instances, and we realize that giving additional space to certain trains is really important to us. So we want to make sure that we work on that first. That to us feels like something we may be able to do early in October, really before that rush of our ridership really picks up. October, November are generally the busiest times of year for us, and so that's what our goal is. Add some additional cars, lengthen some trains, and that will help for two things. That will give us seat capacity, but also will help with some of the bike constraints. And I know we're going to get into that a little bit later, so I'm not going to touch into that too much. I'm going to get into a few of the other topics that are here. There was some comments that talked about train service to certain points. And I'm just going to touch on one real quick that sticks out here, and that's the Tahoe-Reno train. There is no plans currently to provide a train service to Tahoe. We do have a bus open door service partnership with El Dorado Transit that actually provides a great connection from Sacramento Station into South Lake Tahoe. So that is an existing service, and you can take that. I actually was able to take that actually a year ago, and it was a great way to get down into South Lake Tahoe, right in the heart of where all of the hotels are. And it's a really great service that I strongly recommend that you check out. In terms of service into Reno, I think rail service to Reno is also in the early stages of just seeing conceptually, is that even possible? So that's really not on the cards right now, but that actually is currently a service that Amtrak Long Distance provides. We have a similar bus service that goes into Reno. So we also provide a couple round trips that go up to Reno. So I also encourage you to look on our website and check out to see if any of those will work for you. And it's a great way to get out into Reno and be able to connect back to one of our Capital Corridor trains. So I'm going to leave it at that for now. I think the last one that I'll probably should touch on here is related to Salesforce Transit Center. We've been working for some time now to partner with AC Transit, and that really would be the way that we could get into Salesforce Transit Center. We have a very expensive route that goes from Emeryville to San Francisco, and it's just not economically viable to add yet another expense to that by trying to enter into additional contract to pay for the Salesforce Transit Center access. So we're continuing to do outreach with AC Transit, and we're going to continue to provide you updates as we have them. And I think that's all I have for this slide, unless there's other questions that came through regarding this one here. I think somebody asked about what is a venture car. So just very briefly, Siemens has manufactured new equipment that are called the venture sets. They're single level equipment. They do not currently come equipped with a cafe car. They will have a cab car that actually will be delivered probably in the next month. We should start seeing some of those in testing. And those are just the new next generation equipment. that is currently being utilized that Illinois Department of Transportation was the first one to really bring them on. And now our partners, the San Joaquins, have added the first train set and are going through the process of getting eventually up to 7 sets in service. All right, you want to jump to the next slide? So equipment, building on what I talked about regarding equipment, the main focus on here is looking at our bicyclist community and figuring out how can we best serve all of you that are trying to navigate this last mile through, you know, the best mode possible, which is the bicycle, right? So it's a really great way to connect to the stations. And one of the things that we want to make all of our, especially newer riders, aware is that we have locker storage available. So specifically, if you are really mostly needing the bicycle to get to the station, and then hopefully the terminating station where you're getting off is in relatively close proximity to where you're going, I mean, that's a great way to leave your bike, lock it up. It's virtually free. It's like 5 cents an hour, so it's very inexpensive. And it's a great way to, one, ensure that you have space for your bike and it's kept in a secure location. And then B, you know, you're not having to figure out which car you need to get on and whether you'll have adequate storage capacity for your bicycle. So that's the first message that we want to get out to riders. The second one is we've been working with our partners at Amtrak to see how can we better add signage both on cars to really give some quick tips and pointers to riders in terms of how should they lock their bike, what type of bikes are allowed, and just general education. So this is really some basic things that we're going to be doing, but also just doing some additional housekeeping items with our conductors and making sure that they're getting the word out as riders are coming on to our trains. And the busiest ones really continue to be those that go San Jose, Santa Clara up north. So generally those are our heavy bicycle, you know, space constrained trains. And those are the ones that we're going to be continuing to look at. Any other questions regarding bicycle storage or capacity? And if not, then we can keep going here. Okay, building on from what we talked about regarding the schedule. People were asking about adding additional train slots from Oakland to Sacramento. I was also seeing some that were talking about maybe making some adjustments to trains. And all of those are general things that we do explore when we're doing our schedule evaluation and improvements. So I think these are great things that we will take back to the drawing board and we will evaluate. I think one thing, just to give some brief education in terms of how that process works, all of the railroad, except for about a 2-mile portion of our corridor, is owned by Union Pacific. The other couple of miles are owned by Caltrain. So when we enter these conversations, we also have to engage with our partners, both at Union Pacific, at Caltrain, and then other train services that use the rail lines like Amtrak Long Distance and ACE and San Joaquin. So those are really the main players in our corridor. And so sometimes there are some great ideas that come out of either feedback or even an analysis that we make into the schedule. But then after we flush out some details, it turns out that there might be some critical issues that prevent us from doing that. Just to share one thing that will give us some improved reliability and maybe ability to have some better meets at south of Oakland will be a couple of big projects that are really in the near term. One of them is the Agnew siding, and the other one is the Santa Clara crossover. So that these are not big in terms of big capital projects or expansions, but they're big in terms of what they can do in a relatively short time. So we have about a 12-mile corridor of single tracking and having both a siding and a crossover, hopefully in the next couple of years, will give us better reliability when we're having meets with other passenger trains. So I just wanted to touch on those. And then I think we'll probably be revisiting what we can do at that point. So some of the things we'll be improving on now may take some of those things into consideration, but we'll have to come back again maybe in a couple of years once those improvements have been made to really look at maybe some bigger game-changing things. All right, we can go to the next slide. In terms of stations and some of the improvements that are happening around stations, I'm going to start with the biggest one, and the one that in terms of change that will happen in the next few years, and that's the Davis Station. That's a project that's moving down well. There has been great engagement with both Amtrak and the city of Davis to look at both overcrossing and undercrossing solutions to get us to this single island platform that will really improve safety at the station, but will also give a great way to connect the city. So that's probably the biggest ADA improvement and station improvement that's happening. And right now, it looks like the path that is looking really good is the undercrossing solution, which is really the one that we're advocating for. And it's the one that makes most sense based on input from the city of Davis. So that one's moving along well. In terms of other improvements, Amtrak does have responsibility to make improvements at all stations that were found to have ADA deficiencies. So that's American with Disabilities. And right now, just reading off the list that I have, there are improvements that are happening at Richmond Station, as well as Davis Station, which I just mentioned, Martinez Station, Rockland, and there's been a recent completed project at Fremont. So Amtrak is the lead in these projects, but Capital Corridor is engaged in this process, and we're working well with them to ensure that both we're keeping service going and minimizing any outages that we're having. Like, for example, I think that once we have the work at Richmond, we'll have to get some good communication to riders just to inform them of the delays that they might experience there. So that one's not quite scheduled, but that would probably be the most significant one in terms of potential delays to riders. I'm gonna ask Jim to see if he'd like to maybe talk a little bit about either what a potential station could look like at Hercules, and maybe touch on a little bit about on South Bay Connect. I know those were a couple that came up on the stations related comments and feedback.
All right, thanks, Leo. On Hercules, that's a candidate new station, and if you're a frequent rider, you'll see some of the newer development and some of the Bay Trail improvements there, but it would be focused around that newer development that you'll see when you get around Hercules. And it's in the design process right now, but a future new station is planned. It's probably going to take into the 2030 timeframe before it would really be opened. But we're working with the city, and we've been working with them for a long time. It's just been hard to cobble together all the funding. And then on South Bay Connect, that is a project that we have to reroute Capital Corridor service. You'll be hearing more about South Bay Connect in the months ahead, because we'll have our draft environmental impact report out on it. And the South Bay Connect is a reroute of the Capital Corridor trains on the coast subdivision, which means we wouldn't be serving the existing Hayward and Fremont stations, which aren't very highly utilized, but we would concentrate the connections on a new station called Ardenwood, which is a current park and ride facility that is well served by transit that's going to the peninsula. So it's kind of a split the difference and then pick a kind of a middle ground station, but it's also provides much better connections to the peninsula communities and connections there. It also saves some travel time. And so we're considering those impacts and getting those out to the public. Those are two implied new stations underway. And I think ready for the next slide, right, Leo?
Yep.
Actually, I wanted to chime in. This is Priscilla. I wanted to chime in a little bit more about Richmond. Aside from the ADA improvements that Leo mentioned, we're also actively working with BART and with our partners at San Joaquin JPA to do some, upgrades of sort of beautifying, cleaning up the station a little bit, because we've noted, and some of our riders have noted, that there could be some sprucing up that needs to be done there. So we just want to let people know that we are all working together to improve the looks of the station as well.
Thanks, Priscilla. Great input. All right, so this next one is on Tap to Ride, and this is our contactless payment pilot. And Jim, do you want to touch base on this one? There was several comments around how it works and what to expect in the future.
Mm-hmm. Sure, I'd be happy to do that. So this is a pilot program right now. It's called a minimum viable product. So we got something out there last March. We signed a few folks up with it. And ever since then, we have been learning so much about how to roll out contactless payments. And it covers really almost all aspects of our operations. It covers the conductors who you might see using a different phone to validate travel. It involves customer service. It involves collecting revenue, directly collecting revenue and accounting for that in a fiscally prudent manner. So what the Tap to Ride is, it's a process that's going to run in parallel with Amtrak ticketing, and it will be that way for quite a long time. There's maybe the potential to transition most people or leave the options open for different ways to pay for your ticket. So nothing is exclusive there, but we're still in the process of learning things. So that hopefully answers that question there. So the Tap to Ride contactless payment pilot requires registration, and we've had the same folks in the registration for quite some time. That started in March, but we are going to relaunch the program. It's looking like in around August. We relaunch with more participants able to join. We'd also have the readers in all the coach cars. But right now, it doesn't connect to the buses, and it only can work with registered MasterCard and Visa cards. But that will gradually be expanding to Discover and then also American Express. So a lot of the folks who are using it really enjoy it because it's very convenient. It makes purchasing your trip pretty darn easy. All you have to do is register that one time. But we're not registering right now, but we are going to open that in the future. The way this deals, what? Hello?
Go ahead, Jim. No, Jim, I just said I have another question regarding Tap to Ride in the Q&A.
Okay.
With regards to Tap and Ride is concerned, will passengers be able to continue to use the Amtrak app for booking, or will that be discontinued?
Okay, so I sort of answered that before, saying that you can continue to use the Amtrak system and then you won't participate in Tap to Ride. It will just be a parallel system in place. There's no requirement to switch over. It's just a convenience at this point in time. And it's still in testing mode. So the other piece I wanted to talk about was the multi-ride nature for those who might work in the Bay Area or work in Sacramento direction. Those who ride a little more frequently, how does it deal with multi-ride tickets? Well, what it does is it does a thing called fare capping. So after enough use, then trips become free. Right now, this is set up that it calculates the number of trips taken in a weekly period. What we're going to be doing in the future is calculating a kind of a floating 10 ride ticket that it is priced at a certain point and then gradually once you get to maybe the 7th, 8th, 9th, or 8th, 9th, 10th trip, then the trips are free, and then it resets itself. So we have to do some programming with the vendors that are behind all this to get that to happen. But we're really trying to replicate and cover all the customer market, the market base that likes to use frequent travel, get the discounts, and we want to reward those travel and make it simple to collect these fares, because it really is quite simple. And that's one of the beauties of it. It's like, buying something at a coffee shop or paying for many of the stuff that you do in retail shops today. We're also trying to connect it to the bus connection. And that would be mainly be in the San Francisco connection, but we're probably going to be also doing that in the Placer or the Reno to Sacramento buses. It probably won't be on the other buses quite yet, but we have to work with our partner agency, San Joaquin's, to get that to work. So unless there's no other questions, we can move to the next slide.
Yep, thanks, Jim. All right, cafe car. So this is a really good topic that came up, and it's came up a few different times, and it's really just regarding different folks that really appreciate the amenity, that it's a really good service to have, especially when trains are delayed. And that's, I know that's a huge inconvenience and a challenge to our service when we have extended delays, and we do really appreciate having the amenity to be able to offer that, at least as a way to being able to get passengers some refreshments and a bite during those moments, but also just a great way to bring your friends on board and have conversations at the table. And I know I can speak, at least for myself, that my daughter really appreciates being able to go down to the cafe car and grab some treats during our train rides. So we hear you, and I think right now our intent is to continue to look at ways that we can improve the cafe service. There were some, routinely have been some menu changes that our marketing team has been working on to make some improvements. There was some recent price increases on the cafe car, and those were really specifically directed just to trying to make this this amenity that we offer consistent and being able to provide it into the future. So we love this service as much as you do, and we want to be able to continue to provide it. And in order to be able to do that, we also have to make it economically viable for us to do that. So I think our riders understood that was the reason behind the pricing increase. And I think we'll continue to look at ways that we can improve this. So I'm going to turn to Priscilla and see if she wanted to add anything about the cafe service or any other improvements to our offerings.
Thanks, Leo. That is a good summary of what we've been doing. We will be working towards additional price modifications in the near future, just to bring things in line with, the market, if you will. We want to make sure that the foods are still affordable and at a reasonable price, but at the same time, the costs have gone up as well. So we want to make sure that we're making things economically viable for us to offer the service as well. And we want you to enjoy what we have on board. So please, if you have suggestions or requests, we're always open to looking into them. In fact, one of our longtime riders had asked last year for the cheese pretzel. We used to have a cheese pretzel. Well, we've brought it back. So if you haven't tried it yet, go ahead and try it. It's something that was brought back by request. So we're always happy to check into those things, and we do monitor how they perform in terms of sales. And we know that because of the nature of our service, being a shorter route than many other trains, the nature of the snacks that are served on board, or the most popular are snack types of things or in between meal things. So if you have suggestions for what you might want to see, please share those with us on our website and our contact us page, and we would be happy to check those out.
Yep. Thanks, Priscilla.
Oh, and one more thing. We'll be seeing you in the cafe car on May 8th, because we'll be having a Cappy Hour rider appreciation events. So in various trains, look for our social media posts about that. and we will be bringing you some specials and discounted drinks and maybe some other things. So more to come.
Yep, and I'm planning to join you guys out there. So I'll be riding a couple of trains during Happy Hour. So really look forward to doing that. Last time it was a lot of fun. So you'll be seeing a few of us on board. All right, next slide. I don't know if we have something else. I can't remember. And I guess that's the conclusion, just to open it up for any further additional questions or comments that anyone might have.
And I was going to add, the picture you're seeing is pretty much right where the Hercules station will go. Just a little behind that train.
Right behind that train. We do have a question from Michael. Marketing question. How would you develop a marketing and advertising program targeting Bay Area riders to travel to Sacramento for A's and Kings games events? Don't forget, the A's moved to West Sacramento for the 2025 season. I did not know this.
All right. Thank you, Mike, for your question. The A's moving to West Sacramento for 2025 is still pretty recent news for us, so we haven't developed a full plan, although some of us are very excited about that move to West Sacramento, and hopefully we'll draw some of the longtime A's fans up there from here. There's also lots of other baseball things happening too. So there's the River Cats are there. We'll be continuing our partnership with them in Sacramento and looking at potentially some kinds of partnerships with the Oakland Ballers as well. So there's lots of different baseball things happening. As far as the Kings games and events, the timing for our trains don't always work out for that. Maybe for the day games, but the evening games it gets to be a little tough. And I'm hoping that later on, as we bring more service back, we can try to do more things centered around games at Golden One, and for other events there, because I think that there is potential for that. And as you know, we've been trying to really lean into attracting more of a leisure market, and I think that that does have some potential for us. So hopefully we will be able to make those adjustments in the future.
Yeah, and I would just add that Priscilla's done a great job with her team of marketing Levi's Stadium events and 49er games, and I think that some of those same learnings we can definitely look to other venues and see where we can apply them. And Golden One is obviously a great one. That's also just walking distance from the train station. I have done that once before, and that was a great way to attend a concert and be able to stay there. So, yep, those are exciting things that we can look forward to trying out.
We have another question. Please require, this might be a statement, please require conductors to post quiet car signs in morning quiet cars. Some riders aren't aware that the quiet car even exists, and so sit in it and have conversations, telephone calls, etc.
Yeah, good point.
Yep.
Yes, thank
Yeah.
you. We'll make sure to let the conductors know, and also to make sure that they have plenty of signs as well. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and we were actually chatting this over a couple of weekends ago at a family gathering, and somebody that I knew had written the train, and it was an early train, and I think she was not aware of the quiet car, and was informed that it was a quiet car. So I think that comes with learnings of new riders. So we'll try to do a good job of figuring out how do we make sure that people know those things, especially for the sake of our longtime commuters that ride with us daily.
And I think we have one more question. When will the Link 21 recommendation be submitted to the boards? I think that is.
Jim, do you want to jump in on that one?
Yes. So both BART and Capital Corridor boards are considering the Link 21 options on technology. BART is going to have some hearings coming up in the next couple of months, and we're also going to have a presentation coming up at our May meeting. Just a quick update. But then it's more towards the latter part of the year, the fall, when at least planned right now for a technology decision to make, whether it's BART technology or just standard rail, which is what we have. So I would look towards the fall meetings, or possibly, as late as November, but that's about it, unless something changes. So that's the schedule.
Yep. Thanks, Jim.
And then with that, I don't see any more questions. Leo, do you want to say anything more? Anybody else on the panel have anything else to add? Otherwise, we can conclude.
Yeah, nothing further to add. I think you all will be seeing us in a couple of weeks on board for Cappy Hour, and then next week we'll be having our board meeting. So look forward to hearing some of your comments or feedback that might come through then. So see you then. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you.